Hiya, it's TAW Unwrapped. I'm Josh Sexton, unwrapping the big talking points from Liverpool across the football world. We're going to root it heavily in Liverpool for this one, though, and it's going to be brought to you by NordVPN. I've got a couple of questions to ask you first and foremost. Keo, do you like extra internet security and peace of mind?
Love it.
Yeah?
I
Beth?
got anything better.
Do you like the ability to change a virtual location with the click of a button?
Oh, it's so helpful, yeah.
And Jay, what's your opinion on 30-day money-back guarantees?
Unbelievable.
Great stuff from everyone there at nordvpn.com/TAW to get all of that just in one thing, thanks to the cool legends at NordVPN. So nice one to them for sponsoring this show. Fun's over now, unfortunately, guys. We're going to talk about where everyone else is suddenly having more fun than Liverpool are. Keo, I was sort of looking at the table when I was preparing for this earlier, and the only other sides to have lost both of the last two league games are Burnley, Fulham and Nottingham Forest. And Forest are currently calling for the manager to be sacked within the ground. So, I mean, what the fuck is going on is going to be my first question to you.
Our company there is not a load of comedians, like, is it?
No barrel of laughs.
Nah, look, it's been a nightmare of a week. The Palace game in particular, we go back to that. When we come out of that ground and we've been beat, I remember a conversation saying last year when we got beat by Forest, I think we played Bournemouth after it, at home maybe. And that game to sort your head out is a much better game to fix your problems and try, your changes, etc. Galatasaray away is a different kettle of fish, so I was a little bit concerned about that. But then the fact that they've not even been back the AXA, the state of Chelsea, I was a little bit about that game as well. I didn't expect to see the performance that I wanted because we've just had no time. But what I will say is, I mean, it's been shite, but we haven't been battered. Everyone's making out that Liverpool have been getting slapped up every week. They haven't. We've narrowly lost games, which we could have narrowly won. We're still in a decent position. I would have took this before the ball was kicked at the start of the season to be 2 points off, considering what happened. We've had a massively tough start. The fixtures, no one's talking about that. You look at we were saying off air then, we've played two away games, one of the most two tough away games. Yeah, look, let's not get too carried away. I know everyone's having a little bit more fun than us at the minute, but you're going to have shite weeks following Liverpool. You're going to have great weeks following Liverpool, and this one's a shite one. As long as we sort ourselves out, we've got 2 weeks. I know the players away international, get back, and we batter Man United, everyone will be feeling all right.
Yeah, Keo's done the whole show. That's going to be all of it. No, I still want to break this down into three strands of reason, because there's a couple of things that you've mentioned there, Keo, and I'll come to you on this, Beth, because it feels like at the moment there's an overall lack of form, there's an individual lack of form, and then a sort of overall and individual lack of morale and confidence maybe. So I want to start with the overall lack of form, because one of the sort of criticism I saw of Slot over the weekend, and I'm not taking the wild corner of the internet criticism to Slot where people are calling for him to be sacked, because I honestly don't believe those people genuinely believe that. I think that's just rage bait that we shouldn't really engage with. But the genuine criticism of Slot is that it seems like he's gone away a little bit from what was working last season. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
Yeah, I think to an extent, but I also think to an extent his hands has been forced a little bit, because you look at the probably the best thing about Liverpool last season was that consistent ability to play that midfield. That was sort of the heart of everything, and that allowed Salah to be brilliant in front of them, and it really helped out the defence behind. And this season, I think they've played together. Was it the second time that all three of them have started together this season? McAllister, Gravenberch and Szoboszlai. And listen, McAllister's just a million miles off it.
Yeah.
Szoboszlai and Gravenberch are probably Liverpool's two players of the season so far, but half of Szoboszlai's minutes, more than half probably, have come at right back. So I think he's obviously, McAllister's not been fit. The right back situation was out of his hands because Trent wanted to go, so they had to change at right back. That wasn't his decision to get rid of Trent. It was just that was.
I'm also Team Virgil on that. I'm just not having that as an excuse. Like,
no.
Even in the same ballpark as an excuse. For
Even if it was an excuse, I'm not going to say.
Yeah.
and also to be, I think Trent was a brilliant player for Liverpool. He absolutely was. But I don't think last season, I think he was probably 8th or 9th on the list of players whose influence was impacted last season. So I don't really buy into that. But obviously the chopping and changing at right back has happened because you don't have your natural first choice right back there. So I think in terms of the midfield and McAllister not being fit, he's had to make changes. In terms of the forward line as well, I think there's been a lot of talk about people missing Luis Diaz, and I was really disappointed to see Diaz go, and I did always think that he didn't necessarily get the the accolades that he deserved when he was at Liverpool, because he wasn't always the flashiest and he wasn't always super prolific, but I always felt like his work rate and sort of his grit and everything like that was really good for Liverpool, and obviously had his best season in a Liverpool shirt in terms of numbers. So I did think it was, a little bit of a shame that he left, but I understood from a business perspective why he did. But also I think probably half the people now saying that they miss Diaz were slacking him off last season. So again, but I think, he had to make changes to the forward line. His hand was forced by Diaz going, by Núñez going. I think we all accepted that Núñez was going to go. And then obviously what happened to Diogo Jota is so that's 3 of your forwards, it's half of your forward line gone. So I think he has changed things, and there maybe are certain things that he could go back to. But I also think a lot of the change has been enforced, and unfortunately for Liverpool, I think this is just a little bit of a teething period while he tries to establish his strongest 11, because last season, from very early on, he knew to sort of at least 9 or 10 players that he was going to pick week in, week out, and I don't think he does that at the moment.
Yeah, so that's all more than fair from Beth there, Jay. And I sort of wonder when I'm looking at it that, like, there's a couple of players in particular last season who, when you watch them, you felt like Slot had sort of simplified their jobs, and even Trent, you can sort of throw into that as someone that Slot simplified the job, and definitely in the first half of the season before the sort of madness ramped up, it felt like that was a benefit to him. I just wonder whether now there's a couple of players you look at, even Gakpo looks a different player from last season, so it looks like he's got a slightly different job to do, albeit people are calling him one-dimensional and things now, but even that like defensive work that Beth mentions with Diaz there, I'm seeing Gakpo try and sort of incorporate that more into his game, and probably struggle with that. He keeps finding himself too deep, rather where he needs to be close to the goal. So do you think there is just an extent to which things are a little bit overcomplicated now almost?
Slightly. I think it's the first year of like Slot's iteration of his own squad, because last year he's using a Klopp squad and he's not getting by, because you win the league, don't you? So he's not getting by winning the league, but he's got his players. And he's gone, how am I going to fit these players into a system that works for this season? Well, I've made no signings other than Chiesa, but obviously he doesn't get a look in. I think this season is the first, like I say, iteration of Slot's brought in how many players he brought in to make his starting 11 as good as he thinks it will be over the course of the next 5 years. I just think it's been a stylistic change as well, because you're looking different out of possession than last season. We're attacking differently. He doesn't quite know what his best midfield 3 is at the moment, and you can't drop Gravenberch, you can't drop Szoboszlai, because they're both so good. Like I say, you're putting Szoboszlai right back, even at the weekend. He wasn't bringing on Frimpong at right back for Bradley. He's putting Szoboszlai at right back, and it makes you think, has he got confidence in Frimpong yet, or is he not up to speed fitness-wise? I just think it's a bit of a transitional phase, and people from the outside of Liverpool aren't going to accept that as the truth. But for me, it's transitional, because there's so many signings coming in, and the style's completely changed. So that's what I think it comes down to mainly.
I think you're 100% correct. I mean, when he came in, he done an interview and they asked him about the similarities between him and Klopp, and he says there is some similarities, but there's differences as well. He wants to play a certain way, Slot, and it's not the exact same way Jurgen Klopp played. But as you say, he came in last year with no signings, and he's got a team was 3 wins off the top spot. So do you rip that team apart and you start trying to influence a new style of play on there, or do you build a bit of a hybrid system between the two, where you've got Klopp's system and you start implementing your own? I think that's what we've seen last year, and now we've had so many personnel changes. I think we're shifting more to the way Slot's going to play, but the way is forward, the way is not back. The way is not, we looked great under Klopp a couple of years ago, let's kind of start playing like that. I think what we need to do is accept that we've had a lot of change, a lot of players come in, but everyone's happy with the players that's come in.
Yeah.
No one's sitting here and going, I shouldn't have signed him. Maybe 1 or 2 people are saying about certain players, but overall, everyone's made up with the summer we had, and no one wants to change the manager. So,
yeah. Do you think that's the problem, Kieran? It's almost fallen sort of between 2 stools now, really. Like going into the weekend, I almost wanted him to go to the new signings, because I wanted to sort of start to see that like slow process build. I think Rob mentioned it on one of the shows, maybe it was the Friday night in the build up to the game, where he's like, if Liverpool draw that game, but I can see some signs of like what Slot is trying to build with this current Liverpool team, I could take it. And really what it seemed like he went to at the weekend was, and I was a bit worried about this in the pre-match warm-up, albeit I was very sort of boisterous ahead of the game, it's fair to say. One of the things I was worried about was Slot just going to quick fixes, and again he sort of went to like the tried and trusted, the Klopp players really, besides he's like up top. It felt like he just went to the lads that he's brought to the party, and that's where I'm a little bit like, do you want the new signings to be sort of put into the team and get their minutes and do this on the job while things are maybe not going that well, or do you want to just do the quick fixes, and then if we can get some confidence, we bring in the new signings eventually?
Completely take your point. If he was doing this in April, I'd agree with you.
Yeah.
but these players aren't fit. So he has brought in, you know, Isak. He hasn't played in months. You know, he's played a few games for Liverpool now, but he looks miles off it.
Yeah.
He's not fit at all. But we're in a situation at the minute where he's got to pick him, especially when Ekatike goes and gets sent off. His hand's being forced a little bit sometimes. So I don't think he's, you know, shitting himself and going, I need to get Andy Robbo, I need to get all the old guard back on. I think he's managing minutes. I think he knows how long certain players can play. I also think he can see when certain players are struggling, and that's why the likes of Bradley have come off. I think Frimpong is another one where I don't think he trusts him 100% at right back yet. Especially with that Salah going to AFCON as well. I think we might see him tried more at right wing going forward. But I don't think he's looking at it and going, right, these players are no good, I brought in, need to get the old ones back on. I think he's managing minutes, and it's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I want to look at that sort of individual lack of form, and I'll come to you first on this, Jay, because I think everyone's got their own sort of individual scapegoats from this season, the players that they're sort of pinning the lack of form on. But I think there's sort of a big three, and we're gonna sort of take this liberally because the new signings are just going to be sort of one of these individuals. But I want to come to you first on Salah, because he seems to be the one who most people are talking about from the weekend, definitely pundits in the media and things like that. And I sort of found myself wondering off the back of it, and I've not watched the game back, I just sort of watched it in the pub, and I've tried to erase it from memory, to be honest. But like, yeah, I think we were all in the same boat there. But like, when I'm looking at Salah, I'm like, this lack of form, to me at least, is no more glaring than in seasons gone by. Like, we can talk about his age and, you know, all these other kinds of factors that may be playing into it, but I'm not looking at Salah and being like, you're a far worse player than what you've been in seasons gone by. He's been through droughts before, he's been through times where he's maybe not as able to get into games, or it looks like teams have great plans for him. And I think Cucurella played pretty well at the weekend on the whole as well, for someone who's a pretty mad left back. So I don't know how you're feeling in terms of like, is this form now worrying you more than maybe it has in previous seasons?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, because it's not settled the team around him. So my point was a couple of weeks back, I said that when you play Frimpong at right back, it allows Salah to play a bit more centrally, which is where you want him on the ball, sort of in that right half space, you know, to use the woke terms that people are using these days. But that sort of space off the right hand side of the box where he's got a sight on goal, he can put a pass in. Against the weekend, he puts a brilliant cross in for Isak, further over the bar, the little outside the foot passes he's doing. He's still creating chances here and there, but it's a personnel issue, I think, in terms of he doesn't know who his best team is. But then Salah's having to play a lot wider because he hasn't got the support of an overlap like when he had Trent, when he's had Frimpong in the very few occasions this season. But yeah, like you say, Salah, he's had those periods in seasons where he goes 5-6 games without a goal, but he still scored 20 goals before it. He still hasn't scored the 20 goals yet, has he? So that's what the issue is. It's hard to say as well, because I think himself, he said in an interview early on in the season that he was sacrificing his own output for the benefit of the team to allow Ekatike and Isak, for example, to then get the numbers. So it's planning for life after Salah while you've still got Salah, which they say in a year or two time when Salah's gone, it's all already in place and it will be firing on all cylinders. So if it goes another 4 or 5 games and he's not creating, or he's not got a goal or an assist, or he looks out of it, then that's when I'd start getting a bit more worried.
And I guess we can overthink these things as well, Beth, can't we? Like, we can bring in these other factors. Like, I feel like people are looking at Salah and bringing in his age, when I don't think his age is actually relevant to the conversations that we need to have around him at the moment, really. I think Jay is so right to mention that, you know, Salah has basically said, I'm going to become more of a overall team contributor rather than just the sort of goal scorer Mo Salah that maybe you've seen, you know, even last season you could go back to, but definitely in seasons gone by where it feels like he's highest up the pitch, it feels like he's not necessarily dropping deep to get the ball, because the expectation is Liverpool get the ball to him. And I keep thinking it with Konate as well, where like the David Ornstein reports come out last week saying that actually there are talks going on and they're, you know, reasonably constructive, even if there's not an agreement right now, that, you know, that it seems like there's not out of the realms that there will be an agreement reached. And I'm seeing people going, oh, his head's already in Madrid and all these kinds of things. And I'm like, are we just overthinking that as well and trying to find reasons why these players might be out of form?
Yeah, it's very easy, isn't it, to put a narrative on things. And for Konate, you know, I don't think it really is anything to do with the Madrid thing. I think Konate, similar to Salah, he's always been a player that's had peaks and troughs in his form. He's you know, he's never really been Mr. Consistent for Liverpool. He'll have a spell where he's fantastic, and then he might have a spell where he's injured, and it takes him a while to get back up to speed. So I don't necessarily think what we've seen from him at the start of this season is particularly different to what we've seen. But obviously when you start losing games, which Liverpool don't do very often, you know, it's very easy to sort of look for someone to pin the blame on, and the obvious one is the player who's being linked with a move to Real Madrid. So, you know, he's not had his best start to the season by far, Konate, but I thought I thought on Saturday, I don't think you could really pin it necessarily on him. I think, collectively as a defensive unit from front to back, Liverpool just don't look at it, and that doesn't make Konaté's job any easier whatsoever. I think, again, looking at his options when he's trying to play out from the back on Saturday, there was none half of the time. They really, I felt for him at times because it was like he was looking for some sort of outball and there just wasn't one, because of the way that the whole team just wasn't quite at the races. So, yeah, I think it is easy. And with Salah, I mean, I completely agree. I think, again, we've seen him go through these spells before where he's been anonymous, really, and then he bounces back. And I wouldn't be surprised if he does do that. There will come a point where his form will tail off inevitably. I don't think it will be yet. Because I actually think in pre-season he looked so sharp and some of the passing. I know it's obviously different in pre-season, it's less competitive and whatever, but his passing and his creativity, it was, as good as it has ever been. I do think with Salah, and again, it's impossible for us to quantify sort of the impact of losing Diogo on these players, but I do think out of the squad, Salah, maybe out of all of them, has found it the hardest. I think what really struck me was in his post initially when he said, in the summer he was scared of coming back to Liverpool. Yeah. And that really struck me as being like, that must be how so many of them feel. But I just think, obviously against Bournemouth he was just devastated, wasn't he? And even little things like the sort of the biting back on social media about the respecting the Premier League champions. I don't think Salah does that if what happens in the summer doesn't happen. So I think, I'm not saying that that's a free pass for him all season, but I think it's such a difficult one. It is such a difficult one, and I saw some comments in response to what Virgil van Dijk said after the game, where he sort of suggested that things off the pitch had impacted things on the pitch, and people saying that it was an excuse. And to me, that's just absolutely ridiculous because, I don't think he was using it as an excuse. And to be fair, even if he did, I don't blame them at all because I think that's the really difficult thing this season, certainly in the first part of this season, is that this squad of players and the manager all deserve, in my opinion, an enormous amount of grace for getting out and playing. Because a few months ago we didn't even know how they'd be able to do that. A couple of months ago, Slot was saying to his players, if you don't feel like you can train, you don't have to train. That was the situation we were in. So I think, people have short memories and it's easy to forget that. And that doesn't mean that you can't be frustrated or critical. You absolutely can. But I think it's massively affected these players. And I think Salah, probably out of all of them, to me, looks like it's really hit him hard. And also, I think on Saturday, on another day, he could have had a hat-trick. I think the worrying thing sometimes this season is he's not looked involved in the game. I think certainly in the second half, he had some really good chances. The biggest one was that one from Wirtz, wasn't it, when he came on, and it would have been a fantastic assist had that gone in. And a Salah playing with a smile on his face and with a bit more confidence, I think bangs a couple of those goals in. But he's just, I think mentally more than anything actually at the minute, he's just maybe not quite at the races.
Yeah, and Keo, I always find it's sort of the difference in players we're willing to make excuses for. Like I literally sat in the chair you're sat in on Friday and was making excuses for Salah in terms of the new players he's got around him. And I remember last season when Konaté was in his best period of form, and we were saying, it's really impressive because he's not just doing the job of a right centre-back, he's doing it at right back as well, because Trent is always so far forward, and even from the midfield, it didn't necessarily feel like Konaté had that support. So it's probably only fair that it's at some point it's going to catch up to him, but no less when the midfield in front of him is sort of changing all the time, and the right back certainly is changing all the time. The right winger, even if you want to bring Salah into it, is not only out of form but is also struggling with this period of adaptation. So I always think with these things that you can make the excuse about something like Madrid's already in his head, he's already out the door and those kind of things, but you can sort of ignore the things that maybe you're giving Mo Salah the leeway for.
Yeah, I think with Ibou Konaté, firstly, there's two ways to look at it, and there's two sides of it. If he signed a contract tomorrow morning, everybody would be changing their outlook, changing the way they're speaking about him. But having said that, he hasn't signed a contract. And if you don't sign a contract, people are going to question your performances and your commitment to the club. And that's what's happening. I've been a big defender of Canate in the past few weeks because I still think he's a great footballer. I think he's having a bit of a bad patch, but he's been part of one of the best central defensive partnerships in Europe for the past few years. He's a Premier League champion, he plays for his country, Real Madrid are after him. It's all the signs of a decent centre-half, if you'd ask me. So I think the reason why people are on his back is because this signature's not on the paper. I think we got burned last year by Trent, and I think everyone knows now there's a very good chance that he's already in contact with Real Madrid, and we could see history repeat itself. So people are covering their asses a little bit and trying to jump on him now, say, I'm onto you, you know, you're not performing properly. You don't want to be a piss-off kind of thing, but just be careful with it, because as you said last week, there was reports that he's close to a deal. I want him to sign a deal. I think the manager wants him to sign a deal. I think the club wants him to sign a deal. So, don't get me wrong, he's got to improve. And similar with Mo Salah. Mo Salah has got critics this season, and he normally silences the critics with numbers. I've seen Salah have games like that a million times. I've seen Salah look a little bit off it, ball bouncing off him a little bit, but he always pops up with the numbers, always pops up with goals, and always pops up with assists. When he joined, there was an interview with him talking about his position and how he's going to play. He said to slot out when you're the Premier League, but there's going to have to be a bit of, you know, a bit of give, because I'm not going to defend. Now, that's fine. If you're not going to defend, you're going to score goals, you're going to get numbers, no one's going to question it. But again, this season, when the goals aren't there and the numbers aren't there, if you're not busting a gut and trying to help out your right back who's having a nightmare, then people are going to question your performance. So it's a tough one. I still want him in the side. I still think he'll come good, but he has got to start posting some numbers, because I've argued with people in the past about Mo Salah having a bad game or a good game. I don't care if he has a quiet game, if he gets a goal and an assist. It's just not there at the minute, and it'll help Liverpool massively if he cuts inside and finds the top corner, as opposed to putting it over the bar like the weekend. Yeah,
I think that's all really fair, Jay. And I want to come on to this idea of, I've sort of put it as ex-new signing in terms of this, again, this individual lack of form, just to round off on this, because you could basically choose your fighter really with each of the new signings. You could go with Kirkes and his sort of lack of defensive consistency or solidity in general overall so far. You could go with Wirtz and how he was going to be so important to the way that Liverpool play, and he's not yet really come to the party, and probably is a little bit quiet at the weekend again, or at least not sort of active in a way we'd all want him to be. And then, you know, Frimpong and Isak, for what Kieran mentioned before, with Isak in particular, is just a lack of fitness. Do you think their inability to settle, like I'm actually pleased that Keo brought it up before about like how many new signings were made, because it was something I sort of expressed a bit of, you know, worry about in the summer, and I was trying hard not to be like a complete transfer fridge about it, to be honest, where I was a bit like, oh, I don't want to make too many new signings because you can really ruin the continuity. And then suddenly I'm looking at, I mean, there's 4 names there already of the, what was it, 5 or 6 that we made in the summer, that you can look at and be like, well, they're the ones who are struggling for form. So does it become a bit chicken and egg, where actually if you've got four or five lads who are struggling for form, who you've brought in to be important players, or is it because the rest of the team's out of form and then you're trying to bring in 4 or 5 lads that you want to be important players?
It's weird, isn't it, when you think like the transfer window that we've had and all the signings, like you said before, the amount of signings we've made, you wouldn't turn your nose up at any of them. We're all buzzing with all the signings. But when has it ever worked, bringing in 5 or 6 lads who are all going to be starting every single week? There's no like chemistry there from the get-go. Maybe off the pitch at training, there's like, you know, they're laughing and joking together, or they've got little cliques within the group already. You've got 5, 6 new lads coming in who, some of them don't know the league, some haven't even played in the league. Isak hasn't had the pre-season. You know, those sort of things do play into it. But I think with Wirtz, I'm a big Wirtz, foreign Wirtz fan. He changes the game when he comes on the weekends. We don't look anywhere near, like, you know, as bad in the first period of the second half. I think the first half an hour in the second half, we were really, really good, creating a lot more chances, and that was down to Florian Wirtz's runs, his passing. I think everything these days is very black and white as well. You're either really, really good or you're really, really shit, and there's no in between. And I think they've all been fine. There's no been standout player yet. There's no, like, I know the price tag for Wirtz is 116 million quid. He should be able to perform straight away, but again, he's 22 years old. He's only a little lad, like myself, you know what I mean? But he's not used to the league. He's adapting to living in England, adapting to the Premier League. Like the physicality of it is different. I think it'll be a matter of time just playing him through that period where he gets 10 games under his belt, 15 games under his belt, and he's like, okay, this is how you play in the Premier League. This is how you can get away with, you know, doing little snide fouls here and there, or not getting the fouls that you're looking for. In terms of Kirkes, hit and miss again this season, but it's again, he's finding his feet a little bit in a side that's very disjointed, I think. That's what it comes down to mainly, is just it's a disjointed side that's going through a transitional period with bad results now adding to it. So I think it's a big question mark over everyone, but I don't think they've been necessarily awful or they haven't been great. It's just they've all been fine over the course of their 5-6 games that they've played.
I want to come back to you on something you mentioned there as well when we go into sort of overall individual lack of morale and confidence, because one of the things I'm sort of struck by whenever I see the Liverpool team, particularly like it's a thing I'll shout from the rooftops when Liverpool are playing well, is how young this team is. Well, like you mentioned, Vert's there being 22, Kirk's still 21. I don't think he turns 22 until May either. Frimpong, even within that, I think he's like 23, 24. He's actually a little bit more coming into his peak. But then you think of the lads who are already there, Soboslai, Gravenberch, Conor Bradley even playing at the weekend. There's so many young lads in that team that I'm almost like thinking is a drop off, natural, or would it be overstating it to say it's a drop off when the players are so young like they are?
Yeah, I think you do expect it. Like I say, I always go back to the fact that so many new players coming in, but it's a case of maybe you have to suffer in the short term to then benefit in the long term. Like we've seen it in times before, like Ruben Amorim, who's not doing a good job at all, but he said in his first few press conferences, suffer in the short term and in the long term it'll be beneficial. It hasn't worked out for them, which is good. But I think for us, it's like you bringing the average age of the squad down. You've got 2 or 3 players in there like Salah, you've got Van Dijk, you've got Alisson, who are all over 30, Robertson you can throw in the mix as well, who are your mainstays, who are your constants in the squad, not necessarily in the 11, because obviously Robertson's not getting the minutes that he was, but it's a constant in the squad. You've got the leadership group there as well. So there's a constant there of senior players who are all experienced, who know what the club are about, and you're trying to mix it in with all these new players coming in who are all young and fresh-faced, and like I say, half of them haven't even played in the league. So it's difficult to say, but I think long-term it'll do well for us, but it's just having to get through this difficult period at the moment, and then once that's over and done with, hopefully after this international break, bucket ideas up, you can regroup over the 2-week period, and then go again for United. It's
so important to say the experienced players who are supposed to be the ones who can, initiate these young players into the club have had one of the worst summers of their lives.
Yeah.
And look, I've seen a few people over the weekend on the internet who've got very, very, very short memories. Like as you say, there was a period a few weeks back where the manager was saying you can train if you want. So, to say, in response to Van Dijk's comments, I've seen a few people. I'm not going to go too much into it, but these players have lost the fucking mate. And if we have games where it don't go our way, it's not the time to take to social media and start, writing War and Peace and trying to figure out all the reasons why Liverpool are not winning games. It's time to get behind the players, get behind the manager, and even if the result doesn't go your way, the response is, it doesn't fucking matter, we go again next week.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And you've both mentioned, Jay and Kieran, some of the sort of experienced heads there, Beth. And I sort of wonder whether, again, it's Liverpool sort of falling between 2 stools again at the moment where, last season I thought the balance was perfect in terms of Liverpool were bringing through some of these younger lads. And you even had lads like McAllister and you could throw Isak into that. Now, obviously, Kanate even, who sort of bridged the gap between some of those experienced heads that Keo and Jay have mentioned and some of the younger lads. And I just wonder, there's a couple of names that Keo's mentioned there, and I don't want to sort of dog on any of the players really because of everything that's happened with Jota, and I want to sort of finish on that Jota note as well. But just before we do that, Alisson and his injury issues, Andy Robertson and his general sort of lack of pace, I think, this season and decisiveness in key defensive moments, and then Salah with his drop off in front of goal that's happened so far really is there a bit of a worry at all in your mind that they are players who, because of their sort of growing age and they're in the twilight years of their career, cannot necessarily be relied upon quite as much in the way that they used to be? Is there a worry that the younger lads are still not ready to fully sort of rise to the occasion and take the mantle off them, or do you think that's all just overstating it again? No,
I think it's definitely possible. I think part of Chelsea's problem the past few years has been that they just keep on buying young players. And it's fine and it's good to invest in young players because hopefully in the long term they come good. But Chelsea's problem has been they've not had enough senior players to integrate them, and then they've given up on players too quickly, a lot of them, and they've just bought more new players and they don't give them time to develop. So I think what Liverpool did last season was that the slightly younger players in the squad did have those experienced heads around. And it is maybe slightly different this season because those experienced players are maybe a little bit out of form. And also, I think for most new players, when they come to a club in the summer, it's a really exciting time. And you know, you come in and there's initiations and there's like, you go on your pre-season tour and there's, you know, you're getting certain lads to sing and all. And, you know, I'm sure there probably was some of that to an extent, but it will not have been a normal summer for these new lads coming in. You know, that the whole mood around the club will have been so different, and we can't possibly know what that was like. And again, I'm not saying it in the sense that that is a free pass for all of the problems that Liverpool will have this season, because there's room for criticism and there's definitely room for improvement. Absolutely. But, you know, I think that does make it more difficult. But I do think, yeah, the blend at the minute in terms of the ages is maybe not quite, you know, even the likes of Luis Diaz, he was what, last season, 27? There's not an awful lot of players in that Liverpool squad at the moment playing regularly who are like 26, 27, 28. You know, we've lost Trent, who was 26. Nunez was 26, 27. So there is a lot, there's the experienced heads, and then there's a lot of 21, 22, 23-year-olds who, you know, maybe in a year or 2 years will be at the peak or approaching the peak, and hopefully will be fantastic, but it maybe will take a bit of time. But I also think as well, yeah, I think Kieran touched on it earlier, but the fixture list, there's been a lot made about Arsenal's fixture list and how hard it's been, and listen, they've had some really hard away games and they deserve credit for being top of the league after that. But they've also had, within those 7 games, those first 7 games, they've had 3 on paper very straightforward home games. They've had Leeds, they've had Nottingham Forest, they've had West Ham. Liverpool haven't had a single straightforward home game. They've had 3 in the league. Bournemouth, who are, I don't know where they are in the table at the moment, but they must be right near the top. Yeah. Everton, which is completely different to when they play anyone else, because European charge. But you know, that's always, Derby's always different. And Arsenal, and they won all 3 of those games. You know, Liverpool haven't had. I think that was a really important point to mention about the bouncing back from that Forest game against a Bournemouth team who were really out of form at that point. You know, it allowed Liverpool to just sort of steady the ship, not panic, whereas Liverpool have had, you know, off the back of that Palace defeat, have had 2 really tough away games for different reasons. And so I think, again, it's going to be difficult with United, because no matter what state United are in, it's always a difficult game, unless, you know, you beat them 7-0. But I fully expect United to turn up for that game, so it will be tough. But again, I think once Liverpool maybe have a couple of those games, and again, they've got a tough run now. I think the next 4 or 5 are pretty tough for Liverpool. But I think once you get into sort of November, December, the fixtures are on paper a little bit kinder. And I think, you know, those having a run of games like that for the likes of Wirtz, for the likes of Isak, for the likes of these players who are still bedding in, where they can maybe have a bit more swagger, where it's a little bit easier for them, just might give them a little bit more confidence that when they are going to your Chelsea aways, your City aways, your Arsenal aways, they feel a bit more empowered to be able to play the football that they're playing. At the minute, it's just been very, very hard, I think. They've not really had a single game. You know, the easiest game on paper has been Burnley away. And listen, they didn't perform anywhere near as well as they should have done in that game. But again, Burnley away is always historically quite a tough game for even the top teams. So yeah, I think the fixtures haven't helped. I think the fixtures this week haven't helped. I think being back at Anfield will be a massive boost. And I think if they beat Manchester United, then that could be a real springboard then to have a little bit more positivity going forward.
Yeah, it has been a tough time, Jay, and Keo and Beth are both right to mention that. Obviously, an unquantifiably tough summer for the players as well. And I'm sort of thinking, even just from a fan's point of view, of like, you know, that's the sort of game at the weekend that I'd love Diogo Jota to come on and grab a goal for Liverpool. It was those kind of games where, when everything just did look a bit tough for Liverpool, maybe they were just sort of stuttering, Jota would come on and find a way to break a deadlock in that game, and that would even inspire players around him to go and get their goals, and you'd end up seeing Liverpool, you know, often walk away with games because of the big goals that Diogo Jota scored. And that's the thing, like, we're not sort of privy to the conversations that go on behind closed doors at Kirby. We don't know many of the players personally at all, really, so you don't know the way that they're sort of adapting to life without, as Keo says, their mate, really. That's the thing that you just can't quantify in your head. And you look at some of them at the moment. Beth mentioned Salah and his sort of public displays of just sadness, really. That first game at Anfield where he's who's crying in front of the cop at the end when the Jota tributes are going. It's all these different things you feel like must stack up to mean something to these players, that when suddenly things are not looking great, and maybe you're not at Anfield for a couple of games with all those home comforts, it does just sort of, burden your soul a little bit.
Yeah, it can build up, and like the football on the pitch hasn't been the best this season. I don't think there's any better game than United at home to come back to after the international break, when the mood is what it is at the moment and everyone's sort of a bit angsty and it's frustration as well, isn't it? I think if you go out there and the crowd would be on form, won't they, as you'd expect, and you'd hope the Reds are on form as well and come away with a victory. Like I say, it is difficult to run a games after that. You've got Real Madrid and City not long after that as well in the same week, I think maybe 2 weeks after that as well. So the big thing in football for me is momentum, both in a game and in the course of a season. So we've seen it in games last season, like Brighton at home, they're losing 1-0, get 2 goals in the space of 3 or 4 minutes, momentum of the game changes, and then in the course of a season you're building up wins and wins and wins. That's a habit then of just winning games. So you go into the game thinking, we're going to win this game no matter what, no matter if you go 1-0 down, or whether you go 2-0 down, if you go scrappy 1-0 last minute, and building that run of games where you can go 5, 6, 7, 8 games in a row by winning games quite comfortably. And I hope it comes sooner rather than later. But I've seen passages of play this season where it's looked positive. Atletico Madrid at home in the first half, especially.
Bits of Everton, bits of
Everton. Yeah, there's lots of good signs there. So that's a positive that you can take from this bad run of form, is you can see where we're trying to go with it. You can see this new style that we're trying to play is going to be positive for us in the long run. It's just clicking and getting it to work more consistently throughout games.
Yeah, and that's the thing, Kieran, like going back home now and sort of having the almost warm cuddle, really, if you want to call it that, of having 60,000 of us in there, willing them on, willing every bit of play on. Like there's obviously a chance that with all these things and with any lack of form, that things turn toxic, and that's where I guess like we're sort of not necessarily imploring. So I'm always one, like when I'm on these shows, I don't necessarily like to get on any kind of soapbox, really. And me and you spoke about that when we did the Chiesa Unwrapped show from earlier in the season, really, about not wanting to use this as a kind of soapbox. But you mentioned the short memories before, like when 20 minutes hits and probably sort of late 19 minutes hits at Anfield, we're going to be singing about the teammate of all these lads that was lost in the summer. And that's where I almost like do sort of urge people to just be a bit like, give these players credit for even getting to this point where they're 1 point off the top of the table going into the second international break of the season, but also giving them just that little bit of leeway to be like, let's get behind them in the United game, and let's not get too on their backs if things aren't necessarily going our way.
Yeah, credit where it's due is definitely the shout. Look, if anyone listening to this, anyone around this table ever lost anyone close to them, your head's not in the frame of mind for a long period of time. Now, that's difficult going to work in a job. It's difficult, going out for a drink with your mates, operating at a level of Champions League and Premier League football where the margins are fine, so fine. To pick yourself up and to compete is really, really difficult. So it's fine to criticise, and it's fine to say Liverpool should be better. It's fine to suggest, starting lineups or criticise substitutions or whatever it may be amongst yourselves around the table, fine. We'll do it ourselves. But it's the taking to the social media online, it's the shouting in the ground at players and stuff like that. It's just take a little minute and, realise what the club have been through, the players have been through, and what's in front of us. You've got a long way to go in this season. We're second in the table, with a couple of points off the team above us that we've beat. We're all made up with the signings that we've made, and we all love the manager. Let's stay focused and win the league and not get on their backs.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, hopefully it'll be another lovely occasion at Anfield for us playing Manchester United. Hopefully we'll be able to show our love to the players, the ones who won us number 20, the one who wore number 20 as well. Look after each other. Nice one.